What's going on, everyone? So we're going to talk about mono blue Iden or double blue Iden today, as it has been continuously popping up in some top spots, of course, on the online meta, and overall just keeping up with a lot of the other meta control. I would consider this one a hard control list along there with Vader Blue, but it has really performed quite well. Now, the list behind me is by Garbage Rollers. This one actually ended up taking a top 8 spot in one of their recent Dallas Fort Worth 1K cash tournaments that they posted on their channel. But we really started to see double blue Iden take into the forefront after this list. Whoops, that was me playing a game of it. But this list here with Jordan or Sauce with the Richmond 4K winner with a double blue Iden list. Now, I'm going to play some games a little bit later on, but I want to talk about this list as well as some of the reasons why you might want to be running this list over some of your other hard control lists, and of course the comparisons between this one behind me and of course the garbage roll list that they've been playing with and have been iterating on over the past couple of months or so. So this one behind me is on Tower Number 9's channel. It's the interview with Sauce or Jordan here from the Richmond 4K. So I'll leave a link to this video down below if you want to check out some of the reasonings behind every single decision that he made, some of the matchups that he played through, and some of the builds that he went through and all that type of stuff. But really solid video. As for a few kind of short and sweet little things about Iden Blue, why Iden Blue over Vader Blue, for example, and whatnot. Well, the first thing is it's blue, double blue to be specific. And why is that relevant? Vigilance. Vigilance is the key card in basically any hard control, even some soft control lists, as this card is your game winner against aggro matchups, but also against control matchups. It might not be the most important card in every scenario, but what it does is allows you to get to the middle to late game portions of the game against aggro decks because of the massive heal and the ability to defeat a lot of their early game units, such as Red 3s, such as Sabine Wrens, X-Wings, A-Wings, etc., etc., etc. And then against your control decks, well, this gives you a win condition against them, as it allows you to discard their deck into their discard pile and eventually close out the game through dealing damage by them drawing on an empty library, which is really important. So this card is the key card, and the fact that you can play it for 2 less resources in this deck gives you a massive advantage over a lot of other lists, such as Vader Blue, running the same card. Add to that the leader itself. A lot of the reasons why Vader Blue is ran is because Vader is such a proactive, really able to get in their leader at 7 resources, coming down and kind of stabilizing the board after something like a super laser blast, or maybe just kind of controlling your opponent's units by coming down and dealing a ton of damage and picking off a lot of different units. Iden does something a lot different. She's not as proactive in dealing with your opponent's threats. She's a much more reactive leader in that your opponent deals damage to you. You might, kill one of their units off or do something else, and then you're able to heal damage from your base as a result. Now, we started to see early control lists when the game was brand new in terms of releasing their sets. Iden Green, that was the quintessential soft control list that we started seeing, and the reason is Iden is able to get you to those later stages of the game by healing a lot of damage from your base. Now, with outrunning red, which is a lot of the other lists that are hard control, like Iden Red, Vader Blue, for example, you don't get things like Open Fire, Force Choke, but to be honest, those cards are oftentimes your weakest removal options in those decks, right? You don't really want to be giving your opponents cards because you're going to get to the later games and they might be able to leverage those cards. You don't really want to be, open firing a card, as a lot of the times that may not actually kill your opponent's units. It's in some lists it's really good, and in some case, or in some matches it's not. It really depends, but this kind of just allows you to run the most powerful blue removal spells, and in some cases even cheaper in this list than like a Vader Blue list. Vigilance. You also just run the full copies of Takedown and Vanquish and Super Laser Blast and all of the really powerful blue removal spells, and there's really not a huge downside compared to the Vader Blue list, as with some turns being that you can't necessarily remove something, as you don't have your open fires or force chokes. Instead, you have perhaps some of the more ground unit powerful cards such as Viper Probe Droid or Death Trooper in the main deck. Some lists run Viper Probe main deck Invader Blues, for example. Some don't, but you have those cards, and you also have Death Trooper, as I mentioned, which in some cases could be a straight up 2-for-1, as you'll get a 3-1 and then you'll kill off one of their units. And you also have things like Cargo Juggernaut main deck, which gives you another option against the aggro list to heal up in those later stages of the game, as guess what? Iden herself is going to be a vigilance unit, so you're basically always going to get that heal from Cargo Juggernaut when you want it. So really, really interesting list here and really powerful. Now, this one from Garbage Rollers is a lot different than the one from the Richmond 4K. Not necessarily in amount of cards, but in their focuses towards certain decks and what they think is something that they really need to shore up. In this list, we have Bendu, and we also have one less copy of Cargo Juggernaut, but we also have main deck making openings. That means this list is slightly more tuned to the aggro matchup, or any matchup that's really going to get messed up by making opening, or the Sentinel that comes down with Bendu, right? These cards, specifically Make an Opening and Bendu, really do a nice job of either shoring up that middle portion of the game when you can drop this Sentinel, maybe play a cheaper Vigilance, which is really, really relevant, or cheaper Takedown or cheaper Vanquish. And Make an Opening deals really nicely with, of course, any unit that's taken a little bit of damage, if they have from like Death Trooper, for example, but also deals with things like Crafty Smuggler, 7th Fleet Defender, and any other card that's going to be 2 toughness, which is really, really nice. And in conjunction with Make an Opening and Vigilance, you can even take down some of the more powerful threats, such as, you know, your General Dodanos or even your Sabine Leaders, with the combination of those two allow you to do some pretty powerful stuff. But it also gives you that really nice heal. One less Cargo Juggernaut, because although Cargo Juggernaut can be good against the aggro decks, in some cases it can be a little bit slow, although I think Cargo Juggernaut's pretty solid. In those aggro matchups, we have one less here. Whereas the other list that I want to swap over to isn't running your main deck making openings. It's also running one more copy of the Cargo Juggernaut and no copies of Bendu. Instead, we are running the Spark of Rebellion main deck. This is a really, really key difference, as I mentioned, Make an Opening, complete garbage against the control matchup. Doesn't really kill anything. At best, they might kill a Viper Probe Droid, and even in those cases, there are a lot of times when you don't even want to like prepare for your opponent playing a Viper Probe Droid, because you don't want to have potentially a dead card in your hand, and in some lists, they don't even play Viper Probe Droids, so you don't really want Make an Opening, right? It's oftentimes one of your worst cards in the main deck. Instead, having a Spark of Rebellion is key against those control mirrors, as the way you beat those control mirrors is the interaction between Restock, Vigilance, and Spark of Rebellion. You Vigilance, you try to discard your opponent's deck, and then your opponent restocks back their Vigilances and their cards on the bottom of their deck. They can restock their own restock, and it allows you to kind of continuously play this game where you're drawing more and more cards, the best cards off the bottom of your deck, because you put restock in your deck, and allowing you to potentially never mill out, right? Which is really, really important. There are some cases where you can Vigilance and time it so that you get your opponent's restock, which can be pretty powerful, or because of the Spark Rebellion main deck, you are able to actually take those restocks from your opponent's hand and get them into the discard pile, which is really, really cool. On top of that, their sideboards are quite a bit different. We have some Count Dooku's, we have Making Openings in our sideboard. Count Dooku can really finish off some of those middling threats with the 4 toughness or less. Making Opening helps us against the 7th Fleet Defenders, those Crafty Smugglers. But we also have a Bounty Hunter crew. Now, similar to Spark Rebellion and why we're playing it main deck, even though it costs 6 resources, Bounty Hunter crew, even though it costs 8, it's not really being used as an 8 cost ambush unit. Like, that's not really the goal here. Yes, you can ambush things. The goal is to return some of those events to your hand. And in this case, you could recover some really key ones, such as maybe like a Super Laser Blast that's necessary in a specific scenario. But oftentimes, I've actually used Bounty Hunter crew to recur some restocks and Vigilances to my hand in order for me to get even more of an advantage in the late game. Again, 8 costed Bounty Hunter crews isn't really that big of a deal in the control mirror. It just gives you that extra restock copy that might have already been discarded, and your opponent's playing as if they've discarded your last restock, but Bounty Hunter crew maybe recurs it to your hand. And of course, again, you can recur some of the other events in the deck, but that is some cases where I've at least used Bounty Hunter crew. Now, in the sideboard board for your Iden blue list from Garbage Rollers, they have some of the similar ones, such as Devotion, Make an Opening. These are the cards against your more control matchups or your aggro matchups. They also have the extra copy of Bendu. They have the extra copy of Cargo Juggernaut. And most importantly, the 3 copies of Relentless. Similar to why they're playing Bounty Hunter Crew, why they're playing Sparker Rebellions. Well, Relentless is one of the most powerful cards against the control matchup, as well as it can completely negate their vigilances, their restocks, their removal spells, whatever they have, if it's the first event they play. So even though this comes down as an 11 costed space unit, it is worth it in that control mirror. So each deck is having their own take on the control matchup and the aggro matchup. This one from Garbage Rollers is a little bit more tuned to the aggro mid-rangey matchup, whereas the one from Sauce is a little bit better against the control mirror. Either way you go, both are extremely solid, and I want to play through at least the one that I've had a little bit more success with, which is the one from the 4K Richmond. So let's dive into a few games and showcase the double blue Iden list today. All right, so we're diving in here into our first couple of games, just to show you all kind of the deck and what to look out for, some things to keep in mind. And well, looks like our first matchup is against Han Green. Now, Han Green is not super scary. There are really 2 cards that we need to look out for. Assuming that they're not running like Casino Han. If they are, then we're just super far ahead. Oh, never mind. Looks like they disconnected. Just kidding. We'll have to wait for our next matchup. Looks like it's going to be rather Sabine yellow here. So an aggro matchup. There's a few cards that we need to look out for here. They, of course, have their quintessential K2SOs. They have their red 3s, the very good aggro cards for causes. But they also have a few tricks, such as Surprise Strike. They could be running main deck Spark Rebellion, so that's something we need to look out for. And this hand looks, well, decent. One thing to note about, these Sabine lists is Childson usually is pretty good against them, unless they're running main deck Waylay, which isn't normally something they run. There are some lists that do, some lists that don't. And so I'm actually going to keep this hand because in order to get a 6/6 Childson, you need to skip a play anyways. So skipping turn 1 is completely fine for me. And we get to go ahead and resource a Childson and a Spark Rebellion, which are both, well, one's a duplicate and one's not very good in this matchup. And here we get to go ahead and play a Death Trooper out on turn 2, which, well, isn't amazing as they have a Sabine Wren. Well, I take it back. We get to go ahead and potentially play a Viper Probe Droid out on turn 2, which can trade with Sabine Wren here, which is quite nice, which I am going to play instead of that Death Trooper. So I'm going to go ahead and play out a Viper Probe Droid. They have a Sabine Wren, a Wing Leader, a Red 3, and a Green Squadron A-Wing. My guess is that they're going to go ahead and play out their Wing Leader to buff up their Sabine Wren. And, well, this doesn't actually trade with our Childson quite yet. But they do have the Red 3, which is something that they can trade with our Childson with. So that is something to keep in mind. Here's an Entrenched. I don't think Entrenched is going to be extremely good in this one, as we are going to go with the Childson and potentially control the arenas. Search Your Feelings also might actually just not be that good. So the question is, do I want Search Your Feelings or do I want an Entrenched? I think I actually do want the Entrenched because they do have a red 3 in hand, which I imagine they did not resource. And instead, we're just going to go with the 4 reveal Childson. We know they have a red 3, which they probably kept. We know that they have another Sabine, which they probably resourced. And then they have some other Wing Leaders, as we saw earlier, which they already played. And now they can't really get through my Childson unless they want to trade directly into it, which seems reasonable. They might just trade their Sabine for our Childson. And yeah, we're just going to keep passing here. If they want to do nothing, or if they don't want to attack my Childson, that's totally fine. We get to go ahead and get that heal, which is what I was looking for. And now they're going to go ahead and flip their Sabine. We get to go ahead and claim initiative. And they're going to hit us for a decent amount of damage. There is something that I could have potentially done, which is attack for 3, which would have been not too bad, as we do end up getting an extra 3 points of damage. The thing is, if we do that and they just claim initiative, we could be down a lot more damage, so that's something to consider. Here, we could go with the Vigilance instead of the System Patrol Craft. System Patrol Craft gives us the most long-term value if they have no way to deal with it. We saw no more Wing Leaders. They could have a Surprise Strike, so Vigilance would, again, be the most guaranteed play. And I think I would rather go with the most guaranteed play if I wasn't super far behind. But in this case, I think we do need to go with the most value. So System Patrol Craft is the most value if they don't have anything. And even if they do have a surprise strike, that still removes essentially 3 damage from our base from them, which is really, really nice. Here we're going to go in and just hit them with the Viper Probe right into the base and see what they decide to do. Next turn, we can potentially go with Vigilance plus Entrenched, which could be potentially really good. It looks like they don't really have anything to deal with the System Patrol Craft. They could have like a Spec Force Soldier for sure, which would be really bad, but we didn't see it. They have had a few draw steps to draw something, I believe 6 total new cards. But again, all we need to do is just survive. Looks like they're going to start trading into our System Patrol Craft here, which is really, really unfortunate for them. If they have to trade Wing Leader and Red 3 for a System Patrol Craft, that is perfect for us. That is exactly what we wanted to have happen. And they have a Red 3 plus A-Wing, so they were able to bounce back pretty quickly here. But in this spot, what we were able to do is, well, Cargo Juggernaut potentially, or just Vigilance plus Entrenched. And I think I'd rather go with Vigilance, Defeat plus Heal on the Red 3. That's going to give us a nice little chunk of life to stay alive here. And I'm hoping they attack with their leader, and they did. And now we can just go with the Entrenched on the A-Wing, which is going to be really nice for us. So now they can't hit us with the A-Wing, which we have double Cargo Juggernaut, which we're probably going to be playing here very shortly. And we're going to heal up. They have 3 resources. They could potentially play something like another for a cause, for example. It looks like they went ahead and revealed Rogue Operative, R2, and Lethal Insurgent, and they left 1 card on top, which I cannot tell what they left. Millennium Falcon is the card they left on top. Okay, which is totally fine. We're going to go and ready up Iden. And then we're hopefully going to trade our Viper Probe Droid with their Sabine Wren. And then it looks like they took initiative, and so we could just hit their base for 4. So I can hit their Sabine Wren, but I think we're actually going to win this race with double Cargo Juggernaut in hand, plus a Vigilance. And I mean, we drew decently well here because they're going to play their Millennium Falcon. They can hit us for a total of 6. Oh, looks like they're going to exhaust my Iden. So that was a pretty nice little draw for them. We get to go and go Cargo Juggernaut, pass, and then heal a nice little chunk of damage. And then we get to go ahead and claim initiative, which is going to be pretty nice for us because they're going to hit us for 3. They're going to pass, and then we get to go ahead and do whatever we need to do. Potentially double Vigilance, which could look really, really nice. We're going to go and resource this, what's it called? This Spark of Rebellion. We're going to defeat their Leia. It's going to heal us for 1 with Iden. And then we could potentially hit Sabine plus Vigilance, kill it, heal 5. I thought we were going to race, but with the Iden on the battlefield, or the Leia exhausting our Iden, it's a lot more tricky. So instead, I'm just going to go with heal, defeat Sabine, and we're going to be looking really, really nice in this spot because it's actually a heal 6 with Iden on the battlefield. Looks like they have a sneak attack, and they get to go ahead and hit our Iden potentially. Here's an interesting one. I could potentially, just mill, or I could potentially just wait for this to have a target, but I'm actually going to go and shield up the Iden and heal. And the reason for this is Iden's going to get a lot more valuable the longer she stays on the battlefield, because every card we remove is another card that heals us, or every card that we remove from our opponents another point of damage that heals us, which is really nice. And now they have to choose between hitting us for 7, which is a nice little thing, or just going ahead and just trading with Iden hitting us for 3, which is really nice. And yeah, sure, they got our Inferno 4. Now we are just so far ahead. We were able to deal with all their threats. Sneak attack is quite nice, but we have another Cargo Juggernaut in hand. And as you can see, this list is pretty good against aggro because we were able to do a double Vigilance turn right there because it costed 4. And I believe they have the initiative, or they have the last action here. How is Iden not defeated? I shielded with Vigilance. That is why. So we ended up getting a little bit of value there with the shield on Vigilance, and the heal ended up healing a lot more. I'm pretty sure my opponent probably should have attacked the base. That's probably a better way to go about things. That we were at 17 damage, but even in that case, like, we are still super far ahead. as we have a 4/6, a 4/4, and another 4/6 that's going to heal us, which is really, really good. And look at that. We hit a Search Your Feelings. We could potentially go for our other copy of Cargo Juggernaut, which is pretty nice. Here, I think we actually just resource... do we want to resource the Power of the Dark Side? I think we do. I think we're super far ahead in this spot to where we could actually just resource the Power of the Dark Side and just rely on our Cargo Juggernaut. They have it for a cause. That's totally fine. They're going to hit us for probably around 3 is usually what this card hits in the blonde Sabine decks, the yellow Sabine decks. They put 2 cards on top of their deck. They hit Wing Leader, A-Wing, Mild. And they hit Sneak Attack. There we go. Sneak Attack, R2, A-Wing, Wing Leader. Sneak Attack, R2, A-Wing, Wing Leader. So they just left Sneak Attack on top, right? Huh. I'm not actually sure. But it looks like they left Sneak Attack on top. That's fine. We get to go ahead and play out a Cargo Juggernaut and heal us for some more damage. And now we've pretty much solidified our wins. Looks like they had an X-Wing in hand. We get to go ahead and claim initiative. And now we just have to hit our opponent. And we ended up winning. So pretty nice for us here in this game. We just leveraged our double vigilances to heal us a ton along with our Cargo Juggernauts, and we were able to just kind of close out the game pretty nicely as well, they have a sneak attack here, but it doesn't really matter as we just win and kill our opponent. So GG to them. It was a pretty nice little first game to run, and maybe there was a mistake there. I could have done something a little bit different, but all the healing from Vigilance and from Cargo Juggernaut makes it really, really powerful. And let's move on to our game number 2. On to game number 2 here. It looks like a pretty much the same deck, except it's Jin instead of Sabine. So I imagine we're going to want very similar cards. Decided to keep this hand. I'm going to go to resource a Death Trooper and a Vanquish because we have the Power of the Dark Side on 2, following it up with a couple of ways to heal. This is a kind of borderline hand. I'm not a huge fan of this hand, to be honest. It is reasonable to mulligan, but to be honest, I'm not 100% sure what our opponent's even playing. I guess it's not even like the Sabine list last time because they are running green and yellow, which really puts their kind of options a lot more limited. Here, I'm going to go ahead and resource probably a Cargo Juggernaut here because I actually want System Patrol Craft just in case they have Millennium Falcons and such. And I'm actually not going to go with the Power of the Dark Side. Instead, I want to go with the Viper Probe just to see what's going on in their hand. So they have U-Wing Reinforcement, Double Spark Rebellion, and Greedo. That's kind of okay with us. If they're going to Spark Rebellion us, that's probably just fine. They probably have to deal with either the Super Laser Blast or Power of the Dark Side here. And it looks like they're going to go with the Power of the Dark Side. And then they have Greedo, Spark Rebellion, and the other card in hand, which I forgot at the current moment. They have something else in hand. My goodness. That can be a little bit tricky to remember. U-Wing Reinforcements, that's right. So because they have U-Wing Reinforcements, I actually want to keep the double Super Laser Blast in hand. I'm actually going to go in and trade with their Lethal Insurgent here just to kind of kill it off. And go ahead and heal 1 damage from our base. And then we drop our System Patrol Craft. They can go with another Spark Rebellion. They'll see our double Super Laser Blast, which that's exactly what they're going to do. And they probably take away my play this turn, which is System Patrol Craft. But again, if they're going ahead and playing their cards here to deal with my immediate threats, they don't have anything, as far as we know, in hand. They have a U-Wing Reinforcements they supposedly, or at least most likely, did not resource. So that is pretty nice for us. And we have a Lieutenant Charlton, which looks pretty good in this matchup. So very much different from our opponent's deck last time, as it's not nearly as aggressive. And getting this Lieutenant Charlton down is huge, right? It pretty much stops all ground warfare from our opponent. They can action Jin here and potentially go ahead and get some value there, I suppose. But I mean, we just go ahead and claim initiative here, and they can hit us for 3 in the air, totally fine. They can hit us for 3 in the ground on Charlton, maybe kill them off if they're lucky. And they flip a non-unit, which is exactly what they're going to do. They hit a Consortium Star Viper, so we keep our unit around, which is really, really nice. Here we have a Viper Probe Droid, which I think is the card we're going to resource here. Again, I like to have these Super Laser Blasts in hand. Depending on what they hit off of U-Wing Reinforcements, can go pretty poorly for us. So that is what I want to keep around. It looks like they're going to pay the 1 for Millennium Falcon. And I imagine they're going to put a resource down as it allows them to kind of get in with Jin this turn. And I'm going to start us off here just by hitting into their base for 5. I think we could put on some pressure to our opponent here. They have ECL, which is 5 less HP on their base. Looks like they have another Spark of Rebellion. They drew all 3 of them. That's totally fine. Looks like they're probably going to get rid of the, what's it called? The Cargo Juggernaut. So maybe I could have played that beforehand. I just, didn't think they were going to go ahead and go with the triple Spark of Rebellion. We get to go ahead and I Am Your Father. And now we get to go with the Power of the Dark Side, which is really nice, which we drew into. So yeah, they took, and they didn't allow us to kill their Millennium Falcon off, and they took our Cargo Juggernaut. But, I mean, we are ahead on board, and they're not deploying their Iden. We drew into a Vigilance, which looks really, really good on this board. And now we kind of have full control over the game. Looks like they're going to go on Ewing Reinforcements, which is exactly what we expected. And now, depending on what they hit, we can Vanquish it if they hit 1 unit. If they hit, like, let's say, multiple units, we can Vigilance 1, potentially put a shield on our Childson, kill the other. This is really, really bad from our opponent in terms of where they're at. They didn't use their ECL at any point. Looks like they're going to go with double space, which actually works out perfectly because we can go ahead and entrench the Millennium Falcon. And then we get to go ahead and Vigilance away the Consortium Star Viper. And they clearly went all space because we have the ground, warfare kind of situated. And we get to go Vigilance, defeat, heal, kill off their Consortium Star Viper. And now we are like super, super far ahead on board. And also, like, they just don't have, they have less HP than we do. We just kill them this turn potentially. Here I'm going to resource for the Super Laser Blast. I'd rather have all 3 of these cards in hand. And it looks like they're going to activate Jin. We get to go Power of the Dark Side. And we know they have Millennium Falcon in hand, but now they have to ECL something out, and it looks like we just win. So pretty simple there. Spark Rebellion is good, but I think Spark Rebellion is really good on those key turns where someone's playing towards something like a Super Laser Blast. That's when Spark Rebellion ends up being really good, not necessarily when you're just playing it just to get rid of our plays that turn. Because remember, yes, we don't get to play that turn, but they also didn't get to play that turn. And for us, that's actually a huge advantage us, generally speaking. But let's go back into the main menu and let's run another game here. On to game number 3 here, and it looks like we're getting Sabine Green, another little aggro list for us. What looks good against aggro lists? Lieutenant Childsons, making openings. Well, we're not making openings in the main deck here, but Power of the Dark Side, Takedowns, those types of things are all pretty good. This hand has double Avenger, double Cargo Juggernaut, Lieutenant Childson. This hand might look a little bit awkward, but generally speaking, Lieutenant Childson is so powerful that you're okay with actually just keeping a hand like this. We have a turn 1 play, and we have the Cargo Juggernauts, which can help us in the middle stages of the game kind of recover some of that life. And so I don't really see a reason to mulligan this hand. We can just resource both Avengers, keep our both Cargo Juggernauts around, and then we're going to have a nice little portion of healing. And then we just have to draw into something else. Of course, that's kind of how this game works. You do need to draw some things off the top of your deck in order for you to get to the middle stages of the game. So we're going to hope that we draw things like Power of the Dark Side, Takedowns. It's actually not too bad if we have no plays the following turn, because we're going to get a 6/6 Childson instead of a 4/4, which looks pretty nicely as well. Here they have a Rebel Assault, a Wing Leader, and a K2SO. So they're going to Wing Leader up their X-Wing, which, again, if we're able to get a Power of the Dark Side, it looks pretty nice here. Or a Takedown, it looks pretty nice here. So we're going to go ahead and pass. And we drew Death Trooper, Spark Rebellion, both cards that I'm not really happy to see against our opponent here. They're going to Wing Leader up their X-Wing. And we get to go ahead and attack for 3, and then just take initiative here, as we are going to deploy a 6/6 Childson the following turn. And having them in the space and having us in the ground isn't actually all that bad for us, as we're going to be able to get a 6/6 Childson down, and they do have to do something about it. And, ooh, those are some good draws. We're going to probably resource our Death Trooper because we absolutely want to keep both Vigilances around, as that's going to get us into the later stages of the game. And now we can just start to race because they're on a 25 HP base. They probably don't have much to deal with our Lieutenant Childson, as we're going to put it down as a 6/6. We know they have Rebel Assault potentially in hand. They have a K2SO potentially in hand. And almost always, hold on, can we show all of them? There, a little bit of a bug there. Can we show all of them? There we go. They probably kept K2SO in hand. They probably didn't keep Rebel Assault in hand. Rebel Assault's usually not super good in this matchup, which means that, well, they can ECL out a K2SO. That doesn't look super great on this board, as they could just kill themselves into Childson. Then they could trade Sabine Wren plus K2SO into our Childson, which also doesn't look super great. But so we have 4 cards that heal us, and they kept the Rebel Assault. Okay, that is totally fine. We're going to hit in for 3, and we're going to race them, as we have a really, really good shot at racing because of our vigilance here. It's important to note that they have no way to defeat a unit, which means that we can actually put a shield on our Childson and really have a massive, massive advantage. We're going to claim initiative here, and we get to go defeat red 3, heal 5, which is exactly what we're going to do. They're going to deal 1 damage to each base, and well, we also have a system patrol craft, which looks pretty good. But I think in this spot, we just resource the Viper Probe Droid, because I don't really see us using that card at any point right now. And yeah, we're going to go defeat red 3, heal up some damage, and now we are at a point where we're at 9 HP, they're at 8, but essentially they're at, 13, because they have a 25 HP base, but we have more power on the board. So they're going to attack, sure, that's totally fine. We're going to go ahead and hit their energy conversion lab for 6. They're going to attack us for 2 potentially. We have another vigilance. So I am totally okay with this, as we're just going to trade some blows and we're going to race them. They're going to deal 1 damage to each base. That is okay with us. Oh, they're going to deploy Sabine. Okay, we're going to heal up. And they might have an ECL'd Steadfast Battalion, which they could have potentially, claim initiative. And then if that's the case, well, we have another Vigilance. We have Cargo Juggernauts. Like, we're okay in that spot. But yeah, they have an X-Wing. That's totally fine. If they have a Rebel Assault here, then we are looking kind of awkward, right? Let's see what happens if they have a Rebel Assault here. We can go on and resource Search Your Feelings. Let's say they have a Rebel Assault. They hit for 5 plus 3, so that's 8 damage. Yeah, I see no reason not to just hit their base for 6. Rebel Assault doesn't do it. They can ECL, K2SO out. That's fine. They're dead. That's exactly what I was talking about earlier. If they don't have some sort of ground units early on, then they don't usually have the damage to close out the game. We drew the double vigilance when we needed to, which is exactly what we wanted. And well, Childson went the whole way. So pretty nice showing from Childson. And again, maybe we're the aggro deck when we got Childson on the battlefield. It seemed pretty good for us. Again, what the key turn there was when we got our Childson down, and them, well, they're a Sabine deck, so they don't usually have a way to deal with it. But they ended up using up their turn going Rebel Assault, X-Wing, I believe it was, instead of, K2SOing, which is way more important to get out on the battlefield, generally speaking. And they just didn't want to trade with their Childson. They were like, okay, don't really want to trade with Childson. And because of that, we got in 3 hits with Childson, which ended the game. And that's exactly what Childson does. Getting in all those attacks is really important, as although we were, kind of up against it, we had a decent amount of pressure on us. Usually what ends up happening is if your red 3 doesn't stick around in space, you don't have the damage to close out the game if someone's going all ground. Because usually space units are statted a little bit lower than the ground units, for exactly the reason that there are less space units and there's, they're evasive. So they usually stat them a little bit lower. So if you're on the ground, you usually can outrace your opponent. That's exactly what we did there. So, little nice showing from the double blue Iden deck, as it was pretty solid. Again, check out this video, check out this list. This is the list I was running. There's also the Bendu list, which is pretty fun as well. I tested around with this one. This one's a lot better if you are looking to leverage some really powerful turns with Vigilance, as you could cast them for 2, which is insane. So, really, really solid, guys. And hopefully you are enjoying your double blue Iden list if you're playing with it. And I'll see you all for the next one.